This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, is sharing the message that connection is crucial because good relationships are an essential and sometimes overlooked component of mental well-being. If your relationships could use some strengthening, a licensed therapist from Talkspace can help. Therapy can help you communicate better with loved ones, repair conflicts, and understand how to address loneliness and build community. It's easy to sign up. Just go to Talkspace.com and you'll be paired with a therapist within 2 days. You'll meet with your therapist online on your schedule. Plus, Talkspace is in-network with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. Make personal connections a priority and start today. If you're not covered by insurance, get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com and enter promo code SPACE80. That's SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com and enter promo code SPACE80.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Middle is supported by Journalism Funding Partners, a nonprofit organization striving to increase the sustainability of local journalism by building connections between donors and news organizations. More information on how you can support The Middle at listentothemiddle.com. Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ Tolliver. And Tolliver, we've been very busy here. We were going to take last week off. Instead, we ended up putting out 4 shows.
You got to do what you got to do to afford eggs these days, man. Like,
well, you know, of
5
course,
shows.
That's true. And one of those shows was in collaboration with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It was live across the U.S. and Canada. I actually should have brought some eggs back from Vancouver because they're actually still cheap up there. But another was our new weekly podcast extra called One Thing Trump Did, in which we are doing a deep dive into one thing Trump has done each week. It is available in the Middle podcast feed in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. So this hour, we are taking on the battle over transgender rights. About 1.6% of the U.S. population identifies as transgender or non-binary, but that population has gotten a lot of negative attention from President Trump, including in his inaugural address.
As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders, male and female.
The president has also targeted trans athletes, said trans women must be in men's prisons, and he banned trans service members from the military. Here's Navy Commander Emily Schilling, who is transgender, speaking with CNN about that ban.
I've dedicated 19 and a half years of service. It was my dream to join and fly for the Navy since I was little. I did 2 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, 60 combat missions. Later, I went on to be a test pilot and then the meritorious promotions. I have been at the pinnacle of naval aviation. I think I'm proof standing here that, we are qualified to serve.
So how do you feel about all this, and what's the way forward that respects freedom and equality for all Americans? That's what we're asking this hour. Tolliver, can you give everyone the number, please?
Yeah, it's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com.
And because of the sensitivity of this topic, let me just remind you, we want to be civil and respectful as we have this conversation. Let's meet our panel. Iowa State Representative Aime Wichtendahl joins us, the first openly trans elected official in that state. Representative Wichtendahl, great to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure to be here, Jeremy. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And Amy Harmon joins us as well. She covers gender issues for the New York Times. Amy, welcome to the middle.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So before we go to the phones, Amy Harmon, let's define our terms here because this is new to many Americans. Transgender, non-binary, and intersex, those are all different things. What does each mean, just briefly?
Maybe it helps to start by saying that gender identity, which is also a concept that is mentioned in the Trump executive orders, is how people think of themselves in terms of being male, female, or something else. So people who are transgender are people who have a gender identity that is different from the sex they were identified as at birth that was entered on their original birth certificate. People who are non-binary have a gender identity that is not exclusively male or female, or who prefer to just refuse those categories. And people who are intersex are born with sexual characteristics that don't fit a typical male or female pattern. And they can be there are several dozen known variations in chromosomes, gonads, genitals, or hormones.
And why have they been lumped together by President Trump in the sense that when he says there are only 2 genders, it of course affects all of these people, all of these groups?
Part of what he's trying to say is that he doesn't like the idea that gender identity can be substituted for sex. He's trying to make a distinction between how people think of themselves in terms of being male, female, or something else, and the characteristics that they're born with. And so, I think that he's really trying to talk about people who are trans, who have transgender identities, and say that's kind of not something that the government is going to recognize.
Mm-hmm. Representative Wichtendahl, what is it like for you and other transgender Americans to be not just the focus of so much political attention right now, but to have your rights and even your very identity questioned all the way up to the President of the United States?
It's deeply frustrating and deeply disheartening. Certainly this country has a lot of unique problems that it needs to solve, none of which are solved by targeting transgender people. The reality of the situation is this is just pure base politics. It's dehumanizing politics. And I've always said the oldest trick in politics is to say, look over there. Surely you don't want those people living in your community. Surely you don't think those people over there should have rights while they're picking your pocket. And that's what we're seeing. They're using it as a distraction while they, fire federal workers, and just basically gut the government for their own benefit. So that's why they're attacking us, is because we're a very small percentage of the U.S. population that's susceptible to it, but they're dismantling the government and basically fleecing it for themselves because they can, and that's what they're doing.
As we said, you are the first trans elected official in the state of Iowa, but your state was just in the news because your colleagues in the legislature just voted, and then the governor, Republican, signed a law removing transgender protections from state civil rights laws. What does that mean for you?
It's the most frustrating thing, and the thing that I said, kind of on my floor speech last week is I remember when this bill was signed into law back in 2007, and it was done by
providing civil rights protections,
writing gender identity into the Iowa Civil Rights Act to protect, against discrimination in housing, employment, access to credit, education. All of those things were done bipartisanly in 2007 and had remained in state law for the better part of 2 decades. The reality of the situation is that you have a very, very vocal but minority part of the Republican Party who does not want people like me to exist, and they will weaponize the law to ensure that happens. And this is just one step. And Representative Steve Holt basically said the quiet part out loud. He's like, we need to go ahead and do this because our bills keep getting blocked as being unconstitutional. So we need to repeal this so we can continue to do unconstitutional things to Iowans, to transgender Iowans.
Aime Harmon, as a reporter, when you look at the polling right now, I saw a YouGov poll from last year that found that depending on the issue, it's very different how American people feel about this overall, that there's actually broad support for civil rights protections for trans people, but there's also broad opposition to, for example, trans athletes playing in women's sports. Can you make any sense of that, of where people sort of in general right now in 2025 draw the line and they say, okay, I'm okay with this level of rights for trans Americans, but not this level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's true. I think if you ask people, it also kind of depends on the question, but if you ask people, if they think that trans people should be discriminated against or should have rights, they'll say they should not be discriminated against and should, have equal rights. But there is a real discomfort, and it's really reflected in the polls about trans athletes playing in women's sports. We had a poll, the New York Times and Ipsos had a poll that suggested that 80% of Americans do not want trans athletes participating in women's sports. And then, and there's a discomfort, or there's about when it is appropriate for minors to get access to gender transition treatments. Mm-hmm. So those particular issues, there is real sentiment among Americans that that they're not comfortable with those things. And that's something that, in talking to transgender rights advocates, I think there's been a lot of realization of that and desire to try to reach out and to educate people. There's many Americans, more than half of Americans don't know a transgender person, right, or don't realize that they know a transgender person. So I think that looking at some of those polls has started a conversation maybe among trans rights advocates, and to try to think about how to talk about conversation about this.
And we're going to get into both of those big issues. But Representative Wichtendahl, do you see people in your community in Iowa gradually becoming more accepting of trans people over time, or do you think that there's a backlash going on right now in this current political moment?
I think it's an astroturfed movement, because I think you have people with a lot of money who have nothing better to do than to ruin people's lives. When you bring up sports, for example, you know how many trans athletes were in the entire state of Iowa? About 2. So they went out and wrote a law to ban 2 trans girls from playing sports. Let's be real, this is not a ubiquitous thing. This is very much targeting a small group, a minority group. And these kids weren't after elite scholarships. They weren't actively displacing female athletes. They wanted to be part of a team and play sports with their friends. That's the part that's getting overridden when they do this, because they use incendiary language. They use dehumanizing language when they phrase this to the American people. And it's not an honest conversation. It's a very one-sided, very loud conversation coming from the people who don't want us to exist.
What do you say, though, to people who maybe are one of the 2/3 of Americans who don't know a trans person right now, and think that when they do engage in this conversation, they're worried that they're going to sound bigoted if they say the wrong thing?
My whole thing is listen, if you come at this with a place of honesty and open-mindedness and want to have a legitimate conversation, then by all means, let's have this conversation. But the thing that always frustrates me is people arrive at answers and then want to go ahead and talk about it and explain why their opinion is right, where there's usually not good faith dialogue to be had with organizations that are kind of pushing these narratives. Like I said, I will absolutely 100% sit down and with anyone who has good faith questions and talk about it. But when we're already arriving at the answer, then there's not a conversation to be had.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tolliver, trans issues did play a very big role in the presidential campaign.
Yeah, President Trump's campaign spent hundreds of millions of dollars airing ads like this one about Kamala Harris's stance on trans issues.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
Hell no, I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that.
Kamala supports transgender sex changes in jail with our money.
Kamala even supports letting biological men compete against our girls in their sports. Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
And we're going to get to the politics of that in just a moment on The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan, tonight 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of bitch, come round here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drop better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're talking about the current battle over trans rights in America. Tolliver, what is the number to call in?
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on social media.
I'm joined by Iowa State Representative Aime Wichtendahl and New York Times reporter Aime Harmon. And before we get to the phones, and they are lighting up, Aime Harmon, what about the politics of this? How important was that ad that we just heard in Donald Trump's victory, do you think?
It's hard to know how important it was, but one thing that is true is that if you watch TV during the campaign, you almost certainly saw that ad. It was very widely aired. And so many Democrats believe that strategy, that ad in particular, helped push Trump over the edge. And so they're looking at this issue and they're thinking this is a hard issue for the Democrats.
Representative Wichtendahl, what do you think? And I should point out that at least 26 states have now banned gender-affirming care for minors, which, according to the polls, many Americans think is a good thing.
Well, you had asked two questions there. So first one, in terms of how much it played victory, I don't think it played as big as victory as they think they did. They think that they spent $200 million, and it was not even in the top 5 or 10% of issues that Americans identified. Americans identified a bad economy is why they voted Trump into office. They wanted somebody to fix what they felt was like being left behind. They wanted a disruptor of the system, and they wanted somebody to, help bring, basically recover post-inflation. That's what they wanted. That's currently not what they're getting. Secondly, in terms of banning gender-affirming care, you realize this causes people to end their lives when they are denied gender-affirming care for minors. You realize that, right? Because transgender teenagers, I was once a transgender kid. I did not transition until I was 25, and I nearly committed suicide. I nearly stepped in front of a train. So people who are denied this care, the results can be devastating because they don't have access to life-saving care. I've talked to, definitely numbers of families who have kids who have been able to transition. And the one thing that they always say is that after my child was able to go ahead and transition, I saw the light come on in their eyes. They were happier. They're able to do the things. Life is worth living. And that is what you're denying these kids, the ability to have a good life. And just to hand wave away the fact that they're, that they don't care, if they would rather have a dead kid than a trans kid. That is what the authors of these bills would rather have.
Very good points. I just want to ask you, because this is the other argument that is made against that, which is what if they decide later that they wish that they had not done that, and they've already done things to themselves that are irreversible?
The rate of regret is less than 5%. There is no other medical treatment that you can get that has such a low regret rate. Now, when you have doctors, they can customize the plan for the individual. And a lot of times the doctors who do go ahead and provide this really do have not necessarily a level of resistance, but there is a path. You can't just go in and get hormones tomorrow. It is a path. You have to go through psychologists, psychiatrists. You have to be seen with an endocrinologist. And they really do kind of step what the path is. So like I said, they talk about regret, but the real fact is it's greater than 95% success rate. And you can't look at any other medical treatment to see that kind of level of success rate. So again, it's one of those things that's missing the forest for the trees. And again, it's usually waiving those small number of people who had regrets over it to completely erase the hundreds of people who had success and found happiness with it.
Let's go to the phones. Alex is calling from Colorado. Alex, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
I'm a computer engineer. I've been one for 15 years. And trans women are very much overrepresented in my industry compared to their stats elsewhere. If you make being trans intolerable enough in this country, you're going to see a brain drain of the best compiler engineers, everyone who knows Rust, everyone who knows Haskell. They're all going to go to Berlin and become, DJs or whatever. Just leaving aside the inhumanity of the cruelty of it all. Just tactically, it makes no gosh darn sense to send all these very smart people packing.
Interesting. An economic effect you see, Alex. Thank you for that call. Aime Harmon, it brings up an issue, I guess, which is, how is this playing out in corporate America? As you've been reporting, are these issues about trans rights and trans acceptance being seen across companies and organizations?
In terms of discrimination against trans people, I mean, they're definitely there. We did have a story. One of my colleagues wrote today, I think, about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission dropping. So under the Biden administration, there had been several cases brought against employers for discrimination on the basis of gender identity. And now the Trump administration is sort of reversing course on that. And in fact, saying that employers who require pronoun people to be called according to the pronouns of their gender identity and use restrooms or locker rooms according to their gender identity, might be prosecuted for sex discrimination. So there's been a real reversal on that under this administration.
Mia is calling from Southeast Michigan. Mia, welcome to The Middle. Your thoughts as we talk about trans rights in America.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm a trans person myself, and I started transition 12 years ago, which I have definitely noticed a big change in the tenor of the conversation. And with respect to your guests, I vehemently disagree with your guest from Iowa. I feel that I've personally been hurt by the backlash that has been brewing, and I think a big part of the backlash is that posturing of, other people just want to ruin our lives, other people, there's a very low regret rate, all this, which the truth of the matter is there isn't really any good evidence either way. And as someone who's done this for 12 years, I wouldn't say that I necessarily regret things, but I also, looking back with the wisdom of an adult, I realized that maybe it wasn't totally necessary. Maybe other things could have happened that, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that if I didn't do this thing, I was going to kill myself.
Are you saying you regret transitioning?
No, I don't regret it necessarily, but I'm not entirely sure it was fully necessary, which is sort of the line that's always portrayed. It's the example I give is it's like, if you have a sprained ankle, you don't automatically jump to surgery for a sprained ankle, right? Like you wrap it and you give rest and you take Advil and whatever. And I think that currently there's really the idea that, surgery is the only option. We have to jump to this as our first line treatment.
What do you think, let me just finally ask you, Mia, what do you think, though, of the sort of what President Trump has been doing and the saying that there are only two genders in America and that trans people can't serve in the military, et cetera?
I mean, I just renewed my passport and I'm waiting to see, what happens when I get it back. So I'm not glad about it. But at the same time, I have interacted with many people who did vote for President Trump. And I have found that as a whole, they're generally more open-minded than you expect. So I am upset at President Trump, but also I'm cautiously optimistic about the American people in the long term. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Mia, thank you very much. Representative Wichtendahl, I'll let you respond there. I'm sure that there is a diversity of opinion that you've heard even among trans people about this.
I mean, certainly there is. The one thing that I will say is that when it comes down to this, there's two things. Like I said, it didn't start and end with sports. Governor Reynolds, when she posted this bill, started with sports, moved on to gender affirming care, and now has fully repealed civil rights protections. So and keep in mind, we existed in the state with these protections for the better part of a decade and a half, just minding our own business. And the only real reason why this came up is because Governor Reynolds wanted to make her career national. She went on Fox News to go ahead, and because it was all the rage in 2021 and 2022 to go ahead, she was trying to follow DeSantis's lead. Then she basically just threw everyone for a loop and said, no, I want a trans sports ban. But it didn't stop there. The next thing that happened, she's wanting to ban gender affirming care fund. And secondly, kind of on that, nobody is saying surgery is the first result. As I alluded to, it is a process, and people who go through gender transition kind of determine where that process ends. What is cruel is the ability to ban that care, to deny that care, to basically because we heard a lot here in Iowa about parental rights, and the people who are preaching parental rights the loudest were the first ones to take it away from other people. And so they denied their family the right to have access to healthcare. I firmly believe that, you should always find the path that's right to you. I can tell you my story and where it ended up with not having gender affirming care, with not having the ability to be out. It almost killed me. Is that the same for everybody? No, certainly not. But I don't believe the government is the one that should be standing in front of people's ways and their life choices with respect to their healthcare.
Aime, I've got a quick question.
A lot of comments coming in online. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll do my question next time.
No, you can do your question. Do your question.
Okay,
do your question.
Let's do it. Okay, so Aime had a quick question. So our last caller talked about gender markers on passports. I know once President Trump took office, a lot of my friends were worried about that. I'm just wondering, politically, what is sort of the end game do you foresee for President Trump? How much can he do? How much damage can he do to the transgender community? I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, the goal is, like I said, to go ahead and, I mean, with respect to incorrect gender markers is, I mean, there are very real harms that can be done. You putting someone's incorrect gender marker on their either passport, driver's license, whatever it may be, whenever you either interact with somebody from the government or you need to show your ID, one of a couple of things may happen. I mean, first, you inadvertently out yourself. Because your gender marker doesn't match. Secondly, sometimes people will think it's a fake ID, in terms of, what you're seeing in the photo doesn't match with the markers that are on there. So you may get further questions, and it's designed to further make interacting in public life impossible. The real harm is like when they try to like move, like I said, I think when they're looking at moving prisoners from who are inmates on there. Certainly, there is a violation of federal law that's happening there. I think it's something it will maybe blank on the name. It's something like Prevent Rape in Prison Act, PREA, I think is the name of it. But the question then they're like, well, we're moving trans women into men's prison. Can you imagine what someone who looks like me, what would happen in a men's prison? Because I would like you to imagine that horrible situation for a moment, because that is very much what they're trying to do. And yes, it will cause very real harm.
Let's go back to the phones. And Colin, and by the way, Tolliver, you have to say which Amy you're talking to, because both of our guests are named Amy, spelled differently.
Actually, can I just...
Yeah, please, Amy Harmon, go ahead.
To say that, just in response to Tolliver's question, that, there are a lot, your question was, how far can Trump go and there are a lot of lawsuits challenging the executive orders that he's issued on these issues. More broadly, we have a spreadsheet that's following, I think, 100 lawsuits, not about against the Trump administration relating to all the executive orders. But I am following about 12 specifically related to the trans issues. So, for example, the other Amy mentioned moving trans women from women's facilities into men's facilities. That's been blocked by a district court judge. And so is the withholding of gender-related treatments from those prisoners. For now, that's on hold. There's a hearing next week on the trans military ban that's temporarily on hold. The withholding of federal funds to hospitals that provide gender transition treatments for minors up to age 19. It's also been put on hold by a federal judge. So there's been legal roadblocks put in place that are temporary, but so we'll see where that goes. But that's what's happening now.
Yeah. Colin is calling from Philadelphia. Colin, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
Thanks. I love your show. I really feel like this is such a new issue, and I feel like the culture is playing a lot of catch up, and I think it's really important to look at other cultures that have been accepting of this kind of the people who are in this community, looking at Native American Two-Spirits, in Thailand, Lady Boy. I mean, there's this tradition around the world of creating a space outside of gender, really, and creating a third gender or a third space outside of sex, really, that I think is really important from a spiritual perspective, to have a level of respect for the community on a level that's deeper than any kind of like physical trait. And I think looking into that tradition and looking at the way that people in other cultures respect people in a spiritual sense is so important. I feel like the politicization, and especially around use of pronouns, in kind of a way that is kind of a virtue signal or a demand that we kind of make of people. I think that's been not a very helpful way of relating to people on emotional and spiritual kind of way.
Yeah, Colin, thank you very much for that. Aime Wichtendahl, I did see today on the issue of the pronouns that people put that Governor Greg Abbott in Texas fired somebody who didn't take the pronouns off of the signature who worked for the state. Just briefly, your thoughts on the signatures, on the pronouns.
So I'd like to say that phrase back. You fired somebody because they put their pronouns in their email. Really? You took somebody's job, career, life, hope, and dreams and fired them for that? Really?
Yeah.
Really? That's where we're at as a country? You're firing some... Because there are like legitimate reasons to have those, because you don't necessarily know based on name alone if the person you're speaking to is male or female or other, or identifies as other. Like if you have gender neutral names, or even a name that maybe is traditionally assigned to one gender, but the person may be a member of the opposite gender. When you're not interacting with that person in a visual or auditory sense, having pronouns may make sense to understand who you are in fact speaking to. It doesn't necessarily mean you're talking to someone who is identifying as transgender. Right. But I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you would destroy someone's career because they put their pronouns in their email signature. It's ridiculous.
We'll stand by right there. Tolliver, the liberal Democratic governor of California, Gavin Newsom, just came out against trans athletes in girls' sports. This is one area that has attracted a lot of controversy.
Yeah, some athletes, express support for transgender athletes, while others have not. Here's former collegiate swimmer Riley Gaines speaking against the inclusion of trans athletes just last year.
The unfair competition that we faced, the locker room, the silencing we face from our universities, and then the bigger picture of why this matters and what's ultimately at stake if we don't have people willing to defend women's spaces and defend the truth.
That is a very big part of this conversation. We're going to be back with more of your calls on The Middle in a moment.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
14 years in prison for killing a young woman. A 15-year sentence for a crash that caused 3 deaths. 12 and a half years for killing a child and critically injuring her mother. All true stories, all caused by marijuana-impaired drivers. No matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So, if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. In this hour, we're talking about the battle over trans rights in America. You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out to us at listentothemiddle.com. My guests are New York Times reporter Aime Harmon and Iowa State Representative Amy Wichtendahl. And let's go to the phones because they are lighting up. Tara is calling from Colorado. Tara, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my call and for hosting a show on this topic. I'm a parent of a transgender teenager, and we've been on a learning journey with our child for about the last 8 years. And one of the things that really troubles me about the way this issue is being framed in the national dialogue and in policies such as banning transgender service members from the military is it's being framed as an issue of being fraudulent or dishonest. And I just want to share our experience, which I know is consistent with many other families and transgender people, that as I've observed my child, when they were starting at about 5 or 6 years old, there was a distress going on that we couldn't really identify for a while. And as we continued to just listen to our child and consult with mental health professionals and others, we realized that our child was dealing with a deep sense of discord in their being. And as we started to listen to them, and they said, "Hey, I want to wear these clothes instead of these clothes. Can we cut my hair this way instead of this way?" What we saw was our child become, the discord lifted, the dark cloud lifted, and there was this kind of life that came into them, and we've just continued to follow their lead. There's in no way that we've ever pushed or suggested or led our child. We've really just been following their lead in consultation with people who really are working with the evidence. And I want to say that what I know about what it means, how our bodies and our psyches are when we're truthful, is, we're in better health. We are able to function in the world. We're able to participate in careers and schools. And, when we're truthful, there's evidence that our health is better and our outlook and everything is better. And that's what I see with my child when they're affirmed in the way they want to express their gender. Their mental health and everything and their performance in the world is consistent with truthfulness and integrity. And so I see, as we've been able to affirm their gender as they've grown up, they've been able to seek gender affirming care from their pediatrician, so they didn't have to go through a puberty that was causing them to scream on the floor, right? And we're able to get some life-saving medication for them that allows them to become a straight A student in school, maintain a job, have a relationship, have a future vision for themselves. And the last thing I'll say is that as a parent, I want to be able to say to my child, if you work hard in this country, you can be anything you want to be. And I can't currently say that to my transgender child because I know that career in military is currently being cut off to them. Possibly travel is being cut off to them.
Yeah.
The entire country has shrunk by about 50% for my child to just be able to move freely and be in public spaces. And that's not something any parent wants to have to talk with their child about.
Tara, thank you very much for that call. Aime Harmon, I'll just go to you. I'm sure you've spoken to many parents of trans kids and trans teens. What do you think of that and just the idea of truthfulness versus, perhaps some who are coming against trans Americans saying that they're not being honest about what's going on?
Yeah, I think I'm glad to have that caller. I think expressed a sentiment that is widely echoed among the parents of trans youth that I've talked to, and I've talked to people certainly in recent weeks who are really trying to figure out what to do, worried about their children not their hospitals canceling appointments for gender affirming care. Some of them are thinking of leaving the country. So I mean, I think that is an experience that a lot of people are having now, and I do think that this issue of what is the truth is fundamental to what's going on here, and there's but I will also say that when I talk to social conservatives or people who are skeptical of of trans participation in public life, which is kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
There's this sense of that, that there are these fundamental biological differences between men and women, and that is feeling like people are not acknowledging that, and they want it to be acknowledged. And that's kind of, for people I'm talking to who are happy about these executive orders, that's what they are saying. They're saying, finally we're seeing like reality acknowledge that we want to be able to express this biological differences without being labeled, called a bigot or I do think there's this disconnect between like what Tara is talking about. That is obviously very real, what her child is going through and what her child feels. And so trans people are real. They exist. But there's some inability, I think, to really connect on this issue of what is biological sex. I think like I'm working on a story now where I'm trying to get biologists and legal scholars and trans advocates and politicians to like talk to me about how they define sex, biology, and it's hard. It's hard. It's like hard even among biologists. So I think that is a conversation that we need to start having.
And let's get to more of our conversation with Aaron, who's calling from Jackson, Michigan. Aaron, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
Hey, hi. Thanks for taking me on. So as a lifelong conservative and a never Trumper, and my girlfriend has a friend she's known for 30 years who is recently transitioned, and for her to be told that she doesn't know the woman experience has been kind of infuriating, not necessarily for me or for my girlfriend, obviously, but if they were less vocal about it and you just blend in, you can learn, people will see you as a person and no longer as an identity or as a title, and they will not be threatened by that. And it's just something that I feel that Trump has been able to use against the community, and I am so against these people being singled out and being enraged, or having bigots enraged at who they are when all they are is good people. But by having a subset of the community take it over and say, look at me, look at me, look at me, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And in this case, it's not a good type of grease to get. And I just feel that if we talked about that more and we were able to make them people instead of a thing, we would have less of these problems.
But you're saying in part that's because trans people you feel are being too vocal about being trans?
Some, right? Not all of them, obviously. So again, in this one instance, I know a couple of trans people, but my girlfriend is being told by her friend who recently transitioned to female, you don't understand the woman experience. That was shocking to me.
Aaron, I thank you for calling in, and I'm going to go to Representative Wichtendahl. What do you think about that, what Aaron said?
I'm trying to parse it a little bit, but I mean, in terms of, like, we in some cases have to be vocal because our lives are on the line. Like I said, I'll kind of go back to it. Like I said, we had the Civil Rights Act in Iowa for the better part of 20 years, and we were just people minding our business, just going about it. They still came after us anyway. All we were doing is trying to go about our daily lives, going to our jobs, spending time with our families. We weren't bothering anybody. And national political trends, this just became the hot button fad for people to punch down. So, I mean, we can stay quiet. They'll still come after us, Well,
what do you think of so for right now, we have the first trans member of Congress, Sarah McBride, who is, it seems, specifically not making that the issue that she talks about. She's like, I'm here to bring down costs for my constituents. What do you think of that as a strategy, as sort of one of the most, maybe the most high profile trans politician out there right now?
I mean, and she's doing the work. She's doing the work that she ran to do and our constituents elected to, and she probably keeps her head down and is less vocal about it than a lot of people are. And she's still attacked anyway. From your Marjorie Taylor Greenes or your Nancy Maces, they're the ones who are out there trying to basically just make going to the bathroom a crime, and they're the ones that are screaming the loudest. She's there trying to work for her constituents. I will say personally, like I ran for both local office and state office. I didn't make my identity part of the cornerstone of my campaign. My first campaign slogan was stand with local businesses. And I had to become far more vocal in defense of the trans community because we were being attacked. And as the first openly elected trans woman, both in local government and now state government, that responsibility falls to me to speak up for my community. But, for the better part of like the earlier part of my political career, I was the one who was out there like talking about lowering taxes and property taxes and building multifamily homes. Those were the things that I focused on, and those are a lot of the things that I love to focus on. But these issues, regardless of whether we're quiet or whether we're loud, they push these issues regardless. They attack our community regardless.
I am going to go to the next call, but there's a technical problem, so I'm going to ask Jason, our engineer, to go to line 7, and John, who is joining us. John, hello, welcome to the middle.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I come from a conservative background. I even voted for Trump in 2016, but I learned pretty quickly that he's not really worthy of the office. And I fear for the transgender people and anybody else in the LGBT community, even though I have no real connection to any of them. I feel like they have a right to live their life any way they want to. And for them to make it essentially open season, the people that support Trump, many of them are bigoted, racist, and I don't think our country should be encouraging that in any way. It's appalling to me, the things that Trump says and does.
John, thank you. I appreciate the call. And Aime, Harmon, it makes me wonder about as you've looked at the support on the Republican side for some of the things that Trump is doing on trans issues, is this something that is politically popular for when he attacks trans people or decides they're not going to be allowed in the military and things like that?
Well, I think something that the other Aime said earlier, I wanted to is true, which is that what Americans care about is when they're asked to rank what they actually care about in terms of issues, trans issues is always on the bottom of the list. It's always, the economy, jobs, inflation, right? So that is true. So, but it does, this issue does seem to resonate with some portion of the Republican base, and it's broader than that. I mean, it's some centrist Democrats also resonate with this. So I think that's just a political reality, and that's part of why we've seen 5 executive orders focusing on trans issues when trans people are maybe 2% of the population.
Right. Brian's calling from Arlington, Massachusetts. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the middle.
Hi there. Thank you. It's my first time ever calling into a show. So I'm a CIS male in my 50s, father of 4 teens here in Arlington, Mass. And what I don't understand is what I learned from my grandfather is we're a melting pot. I've learned this all my life. We're a melting pot of all different shapes and sizes. And I always told my kids we're cut from the same cloth. And I don't know what I feel that Trump reaches for is fear of things that he doesn't understand or he doesn't know, which could be many things. But it's xenophobia. I can say bigoted this, that, or the other, but they're fearful of what they don't understand. And he reaches for that and he grabs for it. But the thing being, why is this the first thing that he goes for instead of trying to help where help is needed? He's trying to take rights away from the people that live in this country and were born in this country. His big thing is illegals coming. Great, but you know something? It's why is this the big thing? These are people who are taxpayers who are fighting for this country, and it's doing nothing but kneecapping the military, kneecapping our businesses. What it's doing is it's throwing a hiccup into everything. It's a monkey wrench into gears that should have never changed.
Brian, I got to let you go there because we're running out of time here. But Representative Wichtendahl, I'll go to you. Why do you think Trump is focusing on the trans community? And let me bring it to the question that we asked of the hour to wrap it up here. What is the way forward? How do we have this conversation and make sure that every American can have equality and respect and rights?
I mean, it's a couple questions to answer your questions here real quick. I find it interesting, like if we go back to when Trump first ran in 2016, it was kind of interesting because it reminded me, I remember he kind of trolled Ted Cruz because Ted Cruz was the one that was obsessed with the trans community. But one thing that you know about the president, he is a bit of a he is a narcissist, and he listens to the voices who pay him homage. And basically kiss his butt the most. That's how you curry favor with Donald Trump, is you just and the far right, not necessarily the far right, but the basically the dominionists, the Christian nationalists within the kind of the right wing of this figured that out early. And that's kind of why they went all in for Trump. And so now that they're in the inner circle, he will do what they want because they're the ones, lack for a better word, like basically kissing up to him. And, as far as the way forward, I mean, I think we have to call it what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, it is very much, it's an attack on who we are as Americans. If we're to be a free and open people, then we have to realize that it is not okay it is unacceptable to demonize part of the American population to score political points. We have to make that unacceptable in political discourse again. We have to call it what it is. And I do believe, it reminds me a little bit too of, when we were still having the marriage equality debate 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
And you had like Fred Phelps and his church always showing up being the most extreme. And I think that the fact that they're going so extreme will further push. Basically, it'll help. At the end of the day, we will further advance the cause of equal rights in this country because we can see what happens when we don't have them.
That is Iowa State Representative Aime Wichtendahl. We've also been speaking with New York Times reporter Amy Harmon. I want to thank you both so much for a great conversation this hour.
Thanks.
And next week, we're going to be taking your questions on all things artificial intelligence. And you can call in, as always, at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can reach out at listentothemiddle.com, where you can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter. The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmistaz, John Barth, Annika Deschler, and Brandon Kondratz. Our technical director is Jason Croft. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I will talk to you next week.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969. Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drop better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, Just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather. In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to everybody.
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'm going back to my hometown to uncover the truth. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human. Quality proteins aren't just for special occasions. With Omaha Steaks, you get unbeatable flavor and value delivered right to your door. They have an unmatched selection of perfectly portioned proteins, including USDA-certified tender steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, and more. All flash frozen at their moment of peak quality. Then quickly delivered to your door in a dependable cooler. So a great dinner is just minutes away. From Taco Tuesday to a weekend feast. Omaha Steaks practically invented meat delivery, and they've been perfecting the art of premium proteins for over 100 years. With their 100% satisfaction guarantee, you can order with complete confidence. Taste the Omaha Steaks difference. A better, more convenient way to buy proteins. Start getting flavorful proteins delivered today. Visit omahasteaks.com and get $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.